Okay, before we create our car and our road, we need to make sure our scene is oriented correctly so that then when we're using our arrow keys to drive the car, it actually drives the direction we expect. So up here in the top right hand corner of your editor window, we want X to be facing right. So what I can do is I can just start clicking on these. So there we go, X is now to the left. If I click over here again, and then again, there we go. So we have X to the right and we have Y facing up, and we don't see Z because that's actually facing off in the direction away from us. So this is the orientation you want before you create anything. Then to create our first car, what we're going to be doing is basically what game developers do when they start a game and they don't want to be working with all the graphics to begin with. Just makes development a lot faster rather than trying to render everything. They use just basically cubes, basic shapes for their games, and that's what we're going to do for ours. So we're going to create a cube to represent the car. So I'm going to come over here into my hierarchy and right click, and then go down to 3D object and select cube. Now looking at my cube and looking over here in my properties, I can see the positions at 0, 0, 0, which is what I want. Doesn't always put it there though. So if for some reason it's not there, you'll want to change those just by typing in 0, 0, 0. Okay, then I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. So in 3D editors like this, your scroll wheel can be used to zoom in and out. If I press down on the scroll wheel and drag, I can kind of rotate the scene around. If I right click, I can pan left and right or up and down. So get a view that is easy to work with for you. Eventually, I'm going to end up with a view something like this with the camera right behind the car. So what I want to do first is resize my car to make it look a little bit more like a car, even though it's just a cube. So over here, I have my tools. This first one is the hand, just lets me change the view. Then this one is the move tool, so I can move it around. You can see I can drag it up and down. You can see now the Y has changed. If I want to change that back, just type 0, drop it back down. This will rotate it. This one is the one I'm looking for right now. I want to scale it. So with the scale tool selected, I'm going to click on this little green handle to shrink it some. And I'll do the same thing with the red one. There we go. So that looks good for my car. Now what I want to do is add a color for my car. So in 3D editors like this, the materials are actually a separate object. So I'm going to come down here into my assets. I'm going to right click, go to create, and go find material, which is going to be about halfway down. And I'm going to make my car red, so I'll call this red. You can call it car, you can call it whatever you want to, but I'm just going to call it red. That way I know what this material is and I could use it on something else if I decide I want something else to be red. Then once the material's created, I'm going to come over here to its properties and I'm going to choose a red color. Okay, so now I have my material created. Now I just need to drag it onto my car. Now I'm going to repeat that process for the road. So I'm going to come over here again, right click, 3D object, cube. And you can see this one did not put it at 0, 0, 0, so I'm going to quickly change this to 0, 0, 0. So now it's right on top of my car. And notice that both of my cubes have the name cube and then cube 1. You can imagine that as we add more and more objects to a game, that would get pretty confusing. So it's usually a good idea to name these something that makes sense. I'm going to right click on the first cube, go to rename, and call that my car. And then same thing for the road. Okay, so we have our car and road. Road, I'm going to make sure that's selected, make sure the scale tool selected, shrink it down even smaller than the car, but then I'm going to make it at least twice as wide as the car, because what we're going to end up doing is making some obstacles that our car needs to drive around. So that looks pretty good. Now I need to increase its length. I want to make it really long, so I could rotate my screen around and find the blue handle and I could start dragging it. But notice on my properties which one changes as I do that. It's Z, which once again we talked about how with our screen rotated like this, Z is pointing away from us, so that makes sense. So rather than dealing with rotating around trying to do it like that and then rotate back, I'm just going to come up here to Z and I'm going to type in 100. But now if I zoom out, we can see that the car is actually in the center of that 100. So it's at 50 because it positions items from the center of that object. So just like the car is centered on its point, the road's centered. So what I'm going to do is come up here for the position and type in 50 for Y, and we can see that it moves it 50 away from us. So now the full 100 is in front of us, but now my car is off of it. So I'm actually going to back that up a little bit and do like 49, so my car is actually on the road. I don't want my car down in the road because it's going to be kind of hard to drive. So I'm going to select my car, select my move tool, and drag it up so that it's off the road. And seeing it now, I actually think my car is a little bit too tall, too blocky there, so I'm going to shrink it down just a little bit more. Now, it doesn't matter that my car is not touching the road. Once we enable gravity, as soon as the game starts, it's actually going to fall down and land right on the road and stop there, so that's okay if we have a little bit above the road to start with. Alright, so we now have our road in our car. Let's give our road material and then we'll be done with this video. So go down to the assets again, right click, go to create, go to material, and then I'll name this gray since I'm going to make my road gray. Come up here and select a color, and we'll do kind of a dark gray like that, and drag and drop that on the road. So there we go, we now have our car and road. In the next video we will start adding some movement to our car using the arrow keys.